Do you have one of these? A stash of wood blanks? Today we're going to combine these wood blanks with fabric and paper to make gorgeous spring DIYs. I'm Melissa and this is CraftCrumbs. Thank you for joining me. For the first spring DIY, I'm going to use 2 pieces of fabric in this cute bee pattern that I picked up from Walmart and this large mason jar shaped wood blank from the Dollar Tree. Using the mason jar as a template, I cut down both pieces of fabric to match what would be the bottom of the jar. This cotton fabric is very thin, so I'm going to beef it up a bit by adding some fusing, and then I'm just going to iron that in place. And then I'm going to iron another piece of the fusing onto a scrap piece of muslin. I now have 2 pieces of fabric ready for use, the bee pattern with fusing and the muslin with fusing. With the bee pattern facing up, I'm laying the muslin on top of it and pinning around the edges. I'll bring these 2 pieces together with a simple straight stitch. If you don't have a sewing machine or just don't want to sew, that's okay. I'm going to show you the no-sew method to this as well. Once I'm done with that sewing step, I'm going to turn this piece right side out and set it aside. I need to get the wood blank ready, so I'm taking that second piece of bee fabric. I adhere it with Mod Podge using the iron-on method. Turning my attention back to the body of the jar, I'm going to take a few pieces of scrap batting that I had from my quilting collection and put them inside the pocket. I went back to the sewing machine and made a straight stitch there at the top and then trimmed off the excess. I gave it one final press and now I'm adding ribbon and lace. I gave that a straight stitch as well, and now I'm ready to make these 2 pieces come together. Moving back to the actual wood blank, I'm going to flip it over and on that outer edge, mark every 1/2 of an inch. And then I'll use a small drill bit to drill a tiny hole at every marking. Use whatever clamps you have to hold the 2 pieces together while you whip stitch all the way around the belly of the jar. I'm stitching with black embroidery floss, but any cording will work. I know we're only a few minutes into the video, but if after watching it a little while you enjoy it, please press the like button. This gives YouTube your stamp of approval and lets them know it's okay to push out to other creators like us. And while you're here, please drop a comment for me and let me know what you think about these projects, what you would have done differently, and share your tips with the community. I want to thank my loyal commenters, Linda W., Mary I., and Miss Molly, to name a few. Thank you for your unwavering support. Off camera, I painted the lid in a matte gray, and I'm using a black paint marker to give it a little detail around the edges. I'm adding a piece of yellow trim to cover that line of demarcation. I have some scrap cardboard cut into small pieces, and I'll stamp a bee or 2 on that. I'm using double-sided tape and a few black brads to mount this piece to a burlap ribbon, and then use those same brads to attach it to the pocket. It's hard to see how beautiful this chubby bee is on camera. To make it, I fussy cut the bee out of another scrap piece of fabric, glued it to a piece of cardboard, and then covered it with a doming Mod Podge. I'm going to show you a no-sew method. I am using a piece of cardboard that came off of a 12 by 12 scrapbook pad, freehanding the shape of a jar and cutting it out. Here's what makes this the no-sew option. This is a heavier weight fabric referred to as duck or decorator's fabric. Let's get it on the jar. I use a second piece of fabric to create the pocket and glue it down as well. It does wrap around the back, but we'll make it more presentable in a minute. Here goes the lid. I'm covering it with an offcut of scrapbook paper and trimming the 2 pieces of fabric with gold and white ribbon. I think it looks really pretty with the green leaf print. Oh, look how ugly this back is. Not to worry, problem solver Miss Fix It will fix it. To create a front label, I'm using an image I had in my stash. It's the same kind of flower that's in the fabric, I believe. I'm going to ink around the edges of the lid to distress it. One of the things I love the most about crafting is choosing materials, colors, and patterns that complement one another. To someone admiring this, every choice feels intentional. Just like on the larger jar, I'm going to use brads to mount the label onto the pocket. I don't know why this was bothering me, but it was really bothering me. I could never leave well enough alone. I had that raw edge of the fabric and had to cover it up with another piece of ribbon, and that ribbon is quite ugly. I'm stuffing the bottom half of the pocket with leftover fabric scraps. Oh, I forgot to mention the hanger. I used braided jute rope and twisted a little bit of yellow and white baker's twine around it to give it a cute detail. I'm staging this a few different ways to give you inspiration for how you can display it. You can either separate the two jars or keep them together. Hang it on your front door, your kitchen wall, or clamp it to your handbag. I think it would make a lovely charm for your purse. If any of you clamp it to your bag, I'm going to need a picture, email in the description. Moving on to our second spring DIY, I'm going to use this 8-inch square with the raised edge. I dry brush it around those edges with a light coat of white acrylic paint. I'm going to choose a piece of paper for the background from this spring paper pack that I picked up at Michael's a few weeks ago. And after I cut it down to the right size, I'm going to use a glue stick to adhere it to the center of the wood piece. Using just the glue stick wasn't working. It kept pulling up on the edges and very irritating. So I pulled it off, and I'm going to add a few pieces of double-sided tape to get the adhesion I need. That's better. I went digging through my stash to pick out a few elements that I need for this project. This thing that I'm folding here is a spacer for burgers when you're grilling. I actually buy big packs of them and put them on the food scale when I'm weighing my food. It's lovely. That way I don't have to dirty up the scale all the time and clean it. So it works out perfectly for crafts as well. I'm going to bundle up some of these flowers that I picked up from Hobby Lobby and bundling them just like I would if I were a professional florist. This DIY is so precious when done. I'm going to take some of this velour ribbon in the color purple and tie it around the bundle. I'm going to start to put some of these elements together. I'll use double-sided tape to attach the tag to this other background. I'm sorry I'm working so close to being out of frame. Sometimes it's hard to know when I'm recording that I'm out of frame when I am. I appreciate you bearing with me on that. To keep this bundle of flowers on, I'm going to use a bit of double-sided tape combined with hot glue to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I have this sweet little 3-dimensional butterfly by Tim Holtz. I'm going to pop that on the corner. And now, using my favorite jute rope from Amazon, I'm going to cut down a few pieces, fray the ends, and use it to trim out the frame. Before I move on to the next step, I want to flip it over and add a hanger using some more of that velour ribbon. Look what I found in my stash, this little handle, and I had already put some jute rope on there to cover the screw holes. I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue underneath that tag just to make sure that I don't have any parts falling loose. The handle is adding a little bit of weight. I'm going to add a few miniature lavender picks. I'm going to tie some of them in a bundle, and then it'll look like I put a few fresh picks in my bouquet, and then I'm drying what I had left over. This thing is so precious. Here it is, complete. What do you guys think about this one? It's a little detailed, but it's very fast, very easy to make, and the result is so sweet. Look at this beautiful fabric pack that I picked up from Walmart. I used pinking shears to cut a strip of fabric from each pattern. This one measures 2.5 by 17.5 inches. I would probably just do 18 inches in length, but when you see what we're doing with this, you'll understand that we don't want to go much bigger than 2.5 inches. But if you're doing this for other projects, by all means, make it the size that you want. I'm going to use some white thread. I knotted it at the end, and now I'm just going to do a running stitch down one side of this piece of fabric from one end all the way down to the other. I'm zoomed in here so that you can see what I'm doing, but I am going to speed it up a bit. As I get closer to the end, I keep checking to see if I have enough fabric to make a flower, and I end up using the entire 17.5 inches. I'm pulling that nice and tight. And now we need to connect these two sides. So I'm just going to flip it over, and I'm going to attach the one side to the other, but not on the first pleat. I'm going to go over 2 or 3 pleats so that we have an overlap, and I'm just going to pull that through and knot it. I'm sure you've seen this done before, but I'm certain you haven't seen it on the project we're going to be making today. Now I'm just taking my needle and thread, and I'm going up that one side. This part is optional. I just didn't want to see that separation by any means. So I'm just going to stitch right up that one side to make those two ends meet and knot it. To knot it, I'm just going under a piece of thread, under one loop that I've already made, pull it out the other side, and it creates a knot. We need a focal point for the center of the flower. This can be a bead, a brad, fabric flower, or something like I'm choosing to use. I find doilies at Goodwill, garage sales, and get them from friends who'd otherwise toss them out. Look at all the little pieces that I was able to get from just one doily. This is the one I'll use in the project. I glued a small white bead to the center of the crocheted flower, and now I'm going to use that same white thread to attach the embellishment to our larger flower. All I'm doing is putting one stitch at the very top center of each petal. I'll show you quickly how I did this and then speed it up. Question: are you subscribed to the channel? If not, what's holding you back? Go ahead, take a chance on me. You can always unsubscribe if you don't find what you're looking for. Here's another one of the flowers that I made. I don't know why it looks pointy right here because it's not really pointy there at the end, but I'm going to use one of those same crocheted flowers, and this time I'm going to tack it on with a brad. And here are all of the flowers that I created for this project. Have you seen these book boxes at Michael's? I believe they're around $7, and this is a staple in the wood section at Michael's. It's there year-round. You can even get this at a lower cost by using the 30, 40, or 20% off coupons that they have. I'm going to make this into something beautiful. Finally, it's been in my wood stash for what feels like forever, and I was just waiting on something special, a special idea to bring this to you. I'm going to tape off in a few areas and start to paint. I'm using colors that correspond with what we have in the flowers. This is sped up just because I don't want to bore you with the things you already know how to do and would frankly probably put you to sleep. I'm adding in a few pieces of double-sided tape right along that edge on the front, and then I'm going to use a little bit of lace to further embellish this front area. If you ever find when you're doing a wood project like this that you get paint in an area that you don't want, just sand it off. It comes right off. And now I'm going to just lay out the flowers. I'm not going to be able to use all 4 on this, sadly. I think it's just going to be overpowering if I do. So I'm going to decide what flowers and the positioning of the flowers. And then I'm going to draw what I think will be the stem of the flowers. So I'm just placing them down, and then I'm going to go over what I've drawn with my puff paint. I picked this paint up at Hobby Lobby. I thought it looked a little blotchy, so I'm going to go in with a detail brush and try to smooth some of that out. And I think we should point those leaves a little bit. So whatever you think is nice works. And let's take it out over the edge. Now we're just going to place these flowers down. Of the 4, I'm going to pick 2 of the larger that are my favorites, and then this smaller one that is more of a solid color, just so we don't have too much busyness. Here I am once again going in and touching up and adding another leaf. Voila! I decided I wanted a little bit more green on this, so I painted the back green. I did leave a strip of the natural wood showing just for added interest. I painted the outside of the book, what would be the book pages, in white, and now we're ready. Here it is complete. This was such a fast, affordable, and beautiful project that anyone I think can do. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. I had 2 of these natural wood birdhouses that I picked up at Michael's last fall, I believe. They've just been in my stash waiting on spring to arrive. I cut down a piece of scrapbook paper for each of them, and now I'm just kind of taking my fingers and marking over the hole in the front of the birdhouse so I know where to place it on the paper. And I found the perfect size right here. I believe it was 1 inch. And now I'm just going to cut that out, and it should line up beautifully when I glue the paper onto the birdhouse. We're about to find out. I'm going to ink around the edges of the circle I cut out of the paper, as well as the hole in the birdhouse, just to distress it a little bit. I'm going to go back in here with my ink and just distress around the bottom and top edges, and then I'll go a little bit over the rooftop. I'm going to use some of the Dollar Tree twine to haphazardly wrap the birdhouse in different areas. And I think this makes it look cute. It's optional. If you don't like it, you certainly don't have to do it. On the roof, because it comes down at a slant, I do need to tack it in a few areas with hot glue just to get it to lay down where I want it to. And finally, I'm going to go in with just a small flower embellishment on each of the rooftops. So one thing I didn't show in the beginning of this is that I chopped off the little perch that was on the front of this and sanded the area down before I started working. And now I just want to add those back in. So I took a dowel that I had in my stash, cut it in half. I'm going to reattach them and add a little I think this is Spanish moss. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm going to put some of that around the little peg. And then I'm also going to put some inside the birdhouse. You know how sloppy birds are, right? They get their nesting everywhere. If you've ever had a bird nest somewhere close to your home, you can always tell when it's occupied, not because you hear sounds of babies and things like that, but because you see the hot mess that they've left under the birdhouse. I added a small strand of fairy lights to the insides of these, and it just looks so precious lit up. This is not my favorite DIY of the video, but I love the way they look staged in front of some faux plants. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Here's a look back at what we created today. I hope that you feel inspired watching this. I hope it makes you want to get in the craft room right now and make something. Thank you for staying until the end. I do not take it for granted. If you're in the mood for more DIYs, here's another video or a playlist that you can check out next. And until next time, my friend, don't forget to craft what you love.